constrained to observe that in my experience in New York, paper ballots are extremely susceptible to fraud. And at least with the old clunky voting machines that we have in New York, the deliberate fraud is way down compared to paper. When the machines break down and they vote on paper, we've had real problems. So there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. I'm simply observing that as a problem. There's got to be a way of getting the best of our methodologies.
But in fact, the MIT studies have shown that hand-counted paper ballots are among the most reliable. And at least if there's a miscount, you can discover it. You can't discover miscounts with these
then
machines.
Maybe optical scan with paper. I want a paper trail. I want paper somewhere. But pure paper with no machines, I can show you experience which would make your head spin.
And we thank you for...
Very last question. There's word from Florida that they intend to put out a mailing sort of a campaign, an election process whereby they make up for the primary they had before, which was ruled out of order by the Democratic National Committee, and you did not campaign in. They're talking about people mailing in their ballots. Do you trust the security, the honesty of such an election process?
Well, I think we'd have to figure out whether this was fraud-proof. I mean, Oregon, for example, has a terrific mail-in system, but they've already scanned everybody's signatures who's registered to vote so that they can check to make sure that, in fact, the right people are voting. And that's something that I think you'd have to figure out.
Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Waujeedan gaarigaygu waa buuxaa. Waxaas waa absent ballot salka yaala. Soo ma jeedin. Fiiri, waxaas oo dhan soo ma jeedin. Waa buuxaa gaarigaygu. Waa buuxa yaala.
It's all seniors, and they took every ballot.
Every ballot. They just take them from them.
Every single ballot. They knock on the door and say, your ballots, come give it to me, give it to me.
They don't even pay them for it. They just take it.
No. And the ones that didn't vote on ballots, the young people and the women and stuff, they were paying cash. They were getting bags of money the last 1 week here to drive people. And when you vote and they mark you off, then you get in the van, they give you the cash.
Talk about what happened over the weekend. Hillary Clinton was speaking at a Los Angeles event on Saturday, and she still is not over the fact that she lost. Listen to what she said.
Yeah. I think it's also critical to understand that, as I've been telling candidates who have come to see me, you can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
Comes from the lady who wants to get rid of the Electoral College. Your thoughts?
Ainsley, I mean, is there a politician with more temerity anywhere than Hillary Clinton? This is the equivalent of robbing a bank and complaining because the teller gave you 50s instead of hundreds. Hillary Clinton's team, literally, not figuratively, literally is the most overused word in the English language, not in this case, literally paid foreign spies to gather information from Russians to use to attack Donald Trump in the FISA court during the campaign, and she's now complaining that the election was stolen from her? I mean, the gall, the nerve on Mrs. Clinton. And I just wish more networks would do what we're doing and stick to the facts in this case and start asking the questions about the real collusion. Why did Hillary's team collude with Russian intelligence to feed information to our law enforcement? It's a simple question.
Not to mention her email scandals.
We received classified information about the threats to our national security. There are public reports about the fact that Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016. We have heard even most recently from Christopher Wray of the FBI that this is an ongoing threat and something we should be concerned about in 2020. I am a leader on a bipartisan bill in the United States Senate to upgrade the security of our elections infrastructure. And yes, I am concerned for all of those reasons. And the American public should be concerned. And most of all, the President of the United States should be concerned.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. but to watch an elected official who claims to represent the people in this state baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been truly appalling. So let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy.
Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that ballot recording machines and other voting systems are susceptible to tampering.
Even hackers with limited prior knowledge, tools, and resources are able to breach voting machines in a matter of minutes.
In 2018, electronic voting machines in Georgia and Texas deleted votes for certain candidates or switched votes from one candidate to another.
The biggest seller of voting machines is doing something that violates Cybersecurity 101, directing that you install remote access software, which would make a machine like that, a magnet for fraudsters and hackers.
These voting machines can be hacked quite easily.
You could easily hack into them. It makes it seem like all these states are doing different things, but in fact, 3 companies are controlling this.
It is the individual voting machines that pose some of the greatest risks.
There are a lot of states that are dealing with antiquated machines, right, which are vulnerable to being hacked.
Workers were able to easily hack into an electronic voting machine. It was possible to switch votes.
43% of American voters use voting machines that researchers have found have serious security flaws, including backdoors.
We know how vulnerable now our systems were. I know the hackathon that took place last year, where virtually every machine was broken into fairly quickly.
I actually held a demonstration for my colleagues here at the Capitol, where we brought in folks who, before our eyes, hacked election machines. Those that are being used in many states.
Aging systems also frequently rely on unsupported software like Windows XP in 2000, which may not receive regular security patches and are thus more vulnerable to the latest methods of cyber attack.
In a close presidential election, they just need to hack one swing state, or maybe 1 or 2, or maybe just a few counties in one swing state.
I'm very concerned that you could have a hack that finally went through.
Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country. Our country has been under siege for a long time, far longer than this 4-year period. We've set it on a much straighter course, I thought, 4 more years, I thought it would be easy.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Whipping up violence and intimidation, and they're pinning it all on what's been an overwhelmingly peaceful movement for racial solidarity. It's true. Research backs it up. Only a tiny fraction of demonstrations have had any violence at all. So what the president is doing is once again patently false. It's morally wrong. And yes, it is racist. But that doesn't mean it won't work.
Question for you, Mr. Vice President. This interview is going to come out tomorrow, which is early vote day. And so I'm going to ask you a two-part question, which is what I think President Obama used to call pulling a Chuck Todd. So part two, for the folks who have already voted, the 50 million Americans who've already voted, what can they do over the last 10 days to help make sure that you're the next president of the United States?
Well, first of all, you know, what really rankles my opponent is I say that the thing that bothers him most is he's not a patch on Barack's jeans. I mean, Barack was one hell of a president, and I tell you what, man, what an honor it was. I think you guys believe it too. He had more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their whole body, and he had a backbone like a ramrod, has one. To make a plan exactly how you're going to vote, where you're going to vote, when you're going to vote, because it can get complicated, because the Republicans are doing everything they can to make it harder for people to vote. Secondly, we're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our administration, the President Obama's administration before this. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.